She was running. Box braids flying behind her, white sneakers slapping the hot Abuja concrete, phone pressed hard against her ear, calling a number that kept ringing and ringing with nobody on the other end. Ada was running through the streets of Woods like a woman who had just realized, too late, perhaps too late, that the most important thing in her life was about to board a flight and disappear forever. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Every great love story deserves to be told from the beginning. And this one begins not with running, but with stillness. With a city. With a golden afternoon sky stretched wide over the Federal Capital Territory, and two people who had absolutely no idea that fate had already decided to stop playing games with them. Abuja does not rush. She is not Lagos, loud and laughing and always running somewhere. Abuja is steady. Abuja is intentional. Her roads are wide, her parks are lush, and her sky at golden hour looks like something a painter spent weeks getting exactly right. It was in this city, this beautiful, deliberate city, that two seeds of a very old love story were about to finally break open. The first seed was Ada. Adiz Okonkwo was 28 years old, Igbo, born in Enugu and raised right here in Abuja, proud of both in equal measure. She had skin the color of deep rich cocoa, smooth and luminous, like the good Lord took his time. Her box braids were long, decorated with small gold rings that caught the light every time she moved. She owned a boutique in Woods Market at a small, colorful, magnificent little shop called Ada Stitch, and she had filled every corner of it with Ankara fabrics and the kind of quiet love that only a woman building something with her own two hands truly understands. Most days, Ada was happy. Genuinely, truly happy. But there are some kinds of happiness that have a small quiet hole in the middle of them. And Ada, if she was honest with herself, which she rarely was, had been carrying that small quiet hole for a very long time. The second seed was stunned. Adeyemi Oluwetan was 32 years old, Yoruba, son of Ibadan, raised in Abuja, scattered by Lagos, and now, after 6 long years, stepping out of a yellow taxi in Woods with a Canon camera around his neck and the look of a man reading a letter he had been waiting 6 years to open. He was tall, lean, easy in the way he moved, the kind of man that rooms noticed without him asking them to. He stood on that Abuja pavement, looked around slowly, and said quietly to nobody, "Abuja. I don't come back oh." And the city, warm and wide and wise as she always was, smiled back at him. Now here is where fate decided to show off. Tom stopped at a suya spot, because what Nigerian man passes suya and keeps walking, honestly, and raised his camera to photograph the smoke and the hawker's careful hands. And right there, right behind him, walking so close that if the wind had shifted she would have caught the scent of his cologne, Ada walked past. She was on her phone, laughing, completely unaware that the boy who had stolen her chin-chin and made her chase him around the compound for 15 years was standing less than 3 feet away. They missed each other. But not for much longer. Before we go further, we need to go back. Back to a compound in Old Gaki, back when the trees were fat with mangoes and the evening smelled like other people's cooking and childhood. There was a girl, 8 years old, 2 big puff pigtails, bright pink dress, absolutely zero fear of anything. That was Ada. And there was a boy, 12 years old, low haircut, striped shirt, always with a plan and always getting away with it. That was Tond. They grew up on the same street and became, in the way that children become things without deciding to, the very best of friends. They did not care about tribe. They were 8 and 12, what did tribe have to do with who got the last piece of chin-chin? Ada always won the mango tree climbing. Ton always won the chin-chin because he stuffed it in his shirt pocket and pretended he had finished. She chased him screaming across the compound. He laughed until tears ran down his face. And somewhere in all that running and laughter, a seed was planted that neither of them noticed. But seeds do not wait for permission before they grow. Then they grew up, and growing up scattered them. 6 years passed. And the seed sat quietly in the dark, waiting. Now. Metoma. A cafe. Ton was sitting quietly, minding his business, drinking his coffee in peace, when from across the entire cafe came a voice like a foghorn on the Niger River. Ton. Ton, my man. He don't come back, oh. Every head turned. The barista dropped a spoon. A woman spilled her zobo juice. Ton sank low in his chair, but he was already smiling, because that was Chidi. Chidi Okafor. Childhood friend, self-appointed social coordinator, and the loudest human being in the entire Federal Capital Territory, running toward him with arms wide open and absolutely no shame. They sat and talked. About Lagos. About life. About who had changed and who had not. And then Chidi, casual, like it was the weather, said, "You know Ada is still here, right? She get boutique for woos now. Ada stitch. The girl don't blow oh." Ton went very still. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly. And something behind his eyes, something he had packed away carefully when he left for Lagos 6 years ago, quietly unpacked itself. The next morning Ton went to Millennium Park. He told himself it was for the photographs. He told himself that hearts are not so easily fooled. He was crouching near the fountain adjusting his lens when he saw her. A woman jogging on the far path. Box braids bouncing. Something in the way she moved. That particular combination of grace and stubbornness he had not seen in 6 years. He stood slowly. She slowed. Squinted. Tilted her head. And then her hand flew over her mouth. And he started to smile. They walked toward each other. Slowly at first. Then faster. And then they were standing face to face and Ada was shaking her head and Ton was grinning like a fool and she said, "Ton Adeyemi. I cannot believe," and he said, "Ada. You still look exactly the same," and she said, "You are lying." "I look better," and he laughed, that laugh, the one that crinkled at the corners of his eyes, and just like that, 6 years dissolved in 20 steps across a park. They sat on a bench and they talked. Oh, how they talked. The way only two people who have known each other since childhood can, finishing sentences, laughing at references nobody else would understand, arguing about nothing just for the joy of it. The sun moved across the sky. An hour passed. Then 2. Neither of them noticed. And if you are watching this and you have never had a person like that, a person who makes time completely disappear, share this video right now, because this story is for you. In the days that followed, Ton passed Ada's boutique. Just walking by, he told himself. But he saw her through the glass, Ada behind her counter, holding up bright Ankara fabric, laughing with a customer, her whole face alive and open and completely herself. He raised his camera without thinking. His hands just knew. Click. He looked at the image and felt something move in his chest that had no name he was ready to give it yet. What he did not know was that Momangozi had seen him. Momangozi Okonkwo was 58 years old with eyes that could see around corners, through walls, and directly into the hearts of young men who stood outside her daughter's window with cameras and complicated expressions. She opened the door, grabbed Ton by the arm, sat him on the small stool near the fitting room, put a plate of jollof rice in his lap, and stared at him. "Eat," she said. "Then explain yourself." Ton had survived conflict zones. He had navigated Lagos traffic. Nothing had prepared him for Mama Ngozi. Ada walked in to find him sitting rigid as a board, jollof rice on his lap, her mother's eyes drilling into him like she was prospecting for oil. Ada stopped in the doorway. Looked at Ton. Looked at her mother. Looked back at Ton. "What," she said slowly, "is happening here?" Ton opened his mouth. Closed it. Mama Ngozi smiled and said nothing. Ada decided she needed tea before anyone spoke again. Then came Chidi's Owambi. And if you have never been to a proper Nigerian Owambi, then I am deeply sorry because you have not yet lived. Fairy lights in every tree. Ankara decorations everywhere. That deep smoky party jollof rice smell floating through the warm Abuja night. An Afrobeat pouring from the speakers into the bloodstream of every person there, because Afrobeat does not ask you to dance. It makes it impossible not to. Ada arrived in a burgundy off-shoulder top, dark jeans, gold jewelry, box braids loose around her shoulders. She was not trying to be anything. She was just Ada. Across the party, Ton saw her. And went completely still. They found each other on the dance floor. Ton started with confidence, "He wants you to know that." He started with real genuine confidence. But somewhere between the second song and the third, something went terribly wrong with his feet. Ada noticed immediately. She laughed so hard she grabbed his arm for balance, which was exactly where his arm had wanted to be all evening. Then the music slowed. They moved together, her hand in his hand at her back, easy and close and suddenly very aware of the small space between them. From across the party, Chidi watched with folded arms and the smile of a man whose plan was working perfectly. Later they slipped away to a quiet balcony. Just the two of them, and the Abuja night spread before them like 1,000 scattered stars. Ton got quiet. The particular quiet that comes before something important. Ada felt it. She turned. Something in her chest held its breath. He opened his mouth. And her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Back at him. Mouthed sorry. Stepped inside. Ton turned to the city lights and breathed, and whatever he had been about to say folded itself back into the quiet place inside him where it had lived for 6 years. Later that night he told her. East Africa. Long-term assignment. Leaving in 1 week. Ada smiled. That's wonderful, Ton, she said. You deserve it. You'll do amazing work. She meant every word. But there are things the mouth can say that the eyes simply refuse to repeat. Ton saw her eyes. They said goodnight. Stood a bit too long. Then turned away. Ada walked home through the warm Abuja night with a smile on her face and a heaviness in her chest she had no intention of telling anyone about. The next morning she went to the boutique. Cut the wrong length of fabric twice. Sewed the sleeve where a collar should be. Finally buried her face in a large bolt of Ankara completely. Mama Ngozi stood in the doorway watching, saying nothing, which, if you know Nigerian mothers, is somehow louder than anything she could have said. Then Mama sat beside her. Took her face in both hands. The way she had done since Ada was small. Let me tell you about your grandmother, she said quietly. She loved a man. Before your grandfather. A man who made her laugh the way you were laughing at that party. He had to travel. He asked her to wait. She was afraid. So she said nothing. He left. He did not come back, not because he did not want to, but because she gave him no reason to. That woman regretted that silence every single day of her life. Every day. Mama's thumb brushed Ada's cheek. This boy came back to Abuja. You think a Lagos man packs his bags for Abuja just for the clean roads? Don't let him leave twice, and any. Don't waste am. Ada wiped her eyes, squeezed her mother's hands, and stood up. She ran. Past the Woos Market stalls, past the Suyo spot, past the Metoma Cafe, phone to her ear, calling and getting nothing back. She ran to his hotel breathless and hopeful, and the receptionist looked at her with kind eyes and said, "Mr. Adeyemi checked out this morning, Ma." Ada stood very still. She leaned against the cool hotel wall. Outside the sky was turning grey. The way Abuja skies do right before the rain. And the rain came. Heavy and warm and total, not easing in gently, not asking permission, just arriving like a pronouncement the way Nigerian rain always does. Ada ducked under the awning of a small provisions shop, soaked through, box braids dripping, staring at the rain and telling herself this was fine. He was gone. This was fine. She was still convincing herself when she heard her name. Soft. Just above the sound of the rain. Ada. She turned. And there he was. Standing in the rain. Completely soaked. Dark t-shirt plastered to his skin. Canon camera tucked protectively inside his shirt, because of course, even now, he was protecting his camera. He had not left. He was standing in the pouring Abuja rain looking at her the way he had looked at her through every lens, on every bench, at every party, since the moment he stepped back into this city. "I thought you checked out," she said. "I did," he said. "I checked in somewhere else. I wasn't ready to leave." She stared at him. Turned. "You are standing in the rain." He looked down at himself. Back up at her. "I know." And he smiled, that smile she had known since she was 8 years old. Ada Okonkwo, careful, sensible, measured Ada, stepped out from under the awning. Into the rain. And walked toward him. He had called his editor. Pushed the assignment. She laughed first, then cried, then laughed again, that overwhelmed grateful laugh that only happens when something you were afraid to want arrives anyway. He held out his camera. The photograph from the boutique window. Her, in her element. Alive and glowing and completely herself. "I never stopped seeing you," he said. Ada looked at the photograph. At herself through his eyes. And understood something she had perhaps always known, that love does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it was already there. Sitting beside you on a compound step. Sharing your chin-chin. Climbing your mango tree. Sometimes love is not new at all. Sometimes love is just old, and patient, and waiting. They walked out into the evening. Abuja washed clean and golden, also rock standing quietly in the distance like a witness to everything that had just happened. Ada slipped her hand into his. Ton held it like he had been practicing for exactly this his whole life. They had walked perhaps 50 steps down that wide golden boulevard. Hand in hand. The city glowing around them. The rain already a memory. And then Ton stopped. Not because something was wrong. But because something was so completely right that he could not take another step without saying so. He turned her toward him. Gently. The way you turn toward something you have been careful with for a very long time. He took her face in both his hands. His warm brown hands against her deep brown skin. And Ada, careful, measured, Sensible Ada, let him. She placed her hands over his and looked up at him. And the whole city, the wide roads, the golden sky, also rock standing quietly in the distance, held its breath. He kissed her. Softly. Briefly. Like a question that already knew its answer. And when it was done, they rested their foreheads together. Eyes closed. Just breathing. Just present. In no hurry to be anywhere else in the world. Then Ada opened her eyes. Anton opened his. And they looked at each other. And they laughed. The way people laugh when something wonderful has finally arrived. Pause. And the city laughed with them. Golden. Generous. Abuja. Keeping her secret no longer. Pause. If this story moved something in you, if you smiled, if you felt that warmth, please like this video right now and drop a comment below telling us, are you an Ada or a Tond? And if you are new here, please subscribe and hit the notification bell because there are many more stories just like this one waiting for you. Pause. Some people leave. The right ones come back. This was Abuja, again.